My stepbrother, who slept with my pregnant wife while I was working overtime and refused DNA test. So I exposed him in a way they never saw coming. My name's Lucas, I'm 32, and until a few months ago, I thought I had a stable marriage, a baby on the way, a family that actually cared about each other, and a future that was finally making sense. I thought I had a wife I could trust and a stepbrother I could rely on, someone who'd grown up beside me through two messy blended family childhoods, someone I'd offended countless times, even when he was the one screwing up. His name is Kyle, he's 30, the kind of guy people describe as a free spirit, because calling him irresponsible doesn't sound polite. My wife, Megan, 29, gorgeous, confident, the kind of woman whose smile could fix your whole day, was 7 months pregnant with what I thought was our first child. I should have been terrified and excited in the normal ways. Instead, I spent those months feeling like something cold and sharp was living under my skin, whispering at me that something wasn't right. It started with small things, whispers between Megan and Kyle that stopped when I walked into the room. Quick glances, his hand on her shoulder a little longer than necessary. Her phone flipped face down every time she put it on the table. The worst part was that I tried to talk myself out of noticing any of it. I'd come home early from work one day. Overtime had been killing me, so getting off at 2 p.m. felt like winning the lottery. And I heard laughter from our bedroom. Not the usual kind either. It was that nervous, too loud kind of laughter that people use when they've been caught doing something they shouldn't. I pushed open the door and found Megan and Kyle sitting on the edge of our bed. Kyle looked like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar, and Megan smiled too quickly, too forced. "We were just talking about baby stuff," she'd said, waving her hand like that explained why my wife and my stepbrother were hanging out in the bedroom without me. But I let it go, because I was tired, because I loved her, because I trusted her, or I was trying to, as Megan's belly grew. So did my suspicion. And every time I tried to bring it up gently, she would get defensive, sometimes even angry. "Why are you being paranoid?" she'd snap. Or, "I can't believe you don't trust me after everything." Weeks went by like that until the baby shower. It was supposed to be a happy day. Friends, family, pastel decorations, the kind of afternoon that's supposed to make you feel like life is good. But Kyle hovered around her the entire time, adjusting her chair, bringing her drinks, rubbing her back, acting like he was a doting father instead of the useless stepbrother who never showed up for anything in his own life. That night, after everyone left, I finally did it. I asked for a paternity test. I didn't accuse her of anything. I just said I thought it was a good idea for medical reasons, just to be sure, just for peace of mind. Megan's entire face changed. The color drained out of her like someone pulled a plug. Then came the explosion, anger, tears, yelling, throwing accusations at me faster than I could even respond. "How dare you? I can't believe you'd even say that. You're trying to ruin everything. You don't trust me at all." But she refused the test. That was all I needed to know. An innocent woman doesn't refuse. She might cry, she might be hurt, she might be confused, but she doesn't refuse. That night was hell. I barely slept. The next morning, I went to her parents' house. Linda and Mark. Good people, or at least the kind that always treated me like a son. I sat in their living room and told them everything. The suspicion, the weird behavior, the refusal, the timing. And then I said out loud for the first time, "I think Megan cheated on me with Kyle." I will never forget the look they exchanged. It was a look of two people who recognized the truth they didn't want to say. And that's when Linda told me the thing that cracked my whole world open. "Lucas, she's cheated in past relationships. Not once, not twice, several times." I sat there stunned, wondering how the hell no one thought this was important information to mention before the wedding. And then Mark leaned forward and said, "We were hoping she had changed with you." That made it worse, because it meant even her family wasn't confident she could stay faithful. I called Megan's phone later that day. She answered on the first ring, crying. She screamed at me for betraying her by talking to her parents. She said I was destroying our marriage. She said I was hurting her and the baby, but she still refused the test. And then, 3 days later, she snapped. She called me while I was at the hotel I'd moved into and said the one thing I could never unhear. If you don't trust me enough to believe the baby is yours, maybe I shouldn't have this baby at all. My heart dropped into my stomach. That wasn't panic. That wasn't sadness. That was a threat, a manipulation, something deep and ugly, something I'd never imagined could come out of her mouth. That was the moment I realized she wasn't the woman I married. That was the moment I realized she was capable of anything. I hung up the phone shaking. I drove straight to her parents. Linda burst into tears as soon as she heard what Megan said. Mark looked like he wanted to punch a hole in the wall. "This has gone too far," he said. "We called Megan and told her to come over. She showed up, eyes swollen, lip trembling, looking like she'd been crying for hours. But I'd spent the past week drowning in confusion and fear, and at this point I was numb. We all sat in the living room, and that's when her parents dropped the hammer. Linda said, "We were going to give you a large family property gift when the baby was born to help support your future." Megan blinked like she didn't understand. Then Mark said the words that broke her composure. "But we won't give anything if you don't agree to a paternity test and tell the truth." Megan started crying instantly. Not a soft cry, but an ugly, collapsing, gasping cry. She said we were ambushing her. She said we were cruel. She said we didn't understand. She said we were hurting her and stressing the baby. She said everything except the thing that mattered. The child is Lucas's. After 10 minutes of her spiraling, something in her finally snapped. She buried her face in her hands and let out a long, shaking sob. Then she whispered it, the words that detonated my entire life. "The baby isn't Lucas's." Linda covered her mouth with both hands. Mark closed his eyes. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't move. And then she said the second bomb. It's Kyle's. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't think I'd get pregnant. I stood up and walked out before she could finish, because I knew if I stayed, I might lose whatever was left of myself. I walked outside, stared at the sky, and felt everything inside me break. The marriage, the trust, the child, the family, all gone in one sentence. This was supposed to be the happiest chapter of our lives. Instead, it became the ugliest truth I ever had to face. And I knew the next steps would destroy everything completely. I wish I could say part 2 was easier, that once the truth was out I felt some kind of clarity or relief. But the truth didn't set me free, it gutted me. I filed for divorce that same week. Megan didn't fight me on it. She didn't have the energy or the ground to stand on. Kyle disappeared entirely from the picture. Like the coward, he always was underneath the surface. I didn't even get the courtesy of a confrontation. No apology, no explanation, not even an excuse. One day he was texting me about fantasy football. The next he'd blocked my number and moved out of state. I later heard through a mutual friend that he panicked when Megan confessed, packed his truck, and drove to Nevada to start over. That's the kind of man he was. Big enough to destroy lives, too small to deal with the fallout. Meanwhile, Megan broke down completely. I'm not saying that as an insult or to be cruel. It's just what happened. She stopped going to prenatal appointments. She wouldn't get out of bed. She refused to eat some days. Her parents ended up taking her in because she wasn't stable enough to be alone. She kept sending me messages for weeks. Long, rambling paragraphs about how she made a mistake, how she wanted to fix everything, how she still loved me, how maybe we could raise the baby together even if it wasn't mine, how she'd go to therapy, how she'd prove she could change. I read every message because I'm human, because I used to love her, because part of me wanted to believe she wasn't the person she'd shown herself to be. But every time I reread those words, "The baby isn't Lucas's," I felt that cold knife twist inside my chest all over again. I told her calmly, gently, that I wished her a healthy pregnancy and a peaceful life, but I would not reconcile and I would not be involved in raising her child. She begged. She cried. Then she got angry. Then she sent voice messages accusing me of abandoning her in her darkest moment, conveniently forgetting she created the darkness herself. I didn't respond. Her parents eventually stepped in and told her to stop. They apologized to me again, even though it wasn't their burden to carry. The divorce finalized quietly in a courthouse conference room with a tired clerk who'd seen too many broken marriages. Megan didn't look at me during the hearing. I didn't look at her either. I moved out of the house we once shared and into a small apartment across town. I didn't take much with me, just clothes, my tools, and a few pieces of furniture that didn't remind me of anything. It took a while before the reality of everything hit me. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. and just sat in my new living room staring at the wall, realizing that the child I'd been preparing for wasn't mine. The nursery I'd painted wasn't for my baby. The ultrasound photos I'd stare at weren't my kid. And the woman I had trusted with my entire future had been lying to me for months. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was grief. It felt like mourning a family that never existed. I threw myself into work. I worked overtime not because I needed the money anymore, but because the silence of home felt too loud. I lost weight without noticing. My friends invited me out, and I always turned them down. I wasn't oppressed in the dramatic sense. I wasn't lying in bed all day or crying every morning. I just felt like someone had hollowed out my chest and filled it with concrete. Maybe that was depression. I don't know. What I do know is that healing took time, and the first step came from the last person I expected, Megan's dad. Mark showed up at my apartment one afternoon with 2 cups of coffee. No call, no warning. Just knocked on the door like he used to when I was dating Megan, and he'd stop by to help me fix things around the house. I let him in mostly because he looked as exhausted as I felt. He sat down, handed me a coffee, and said, "I want you to know you did everything right. You tried. You loved her. You were loyal. This isn't your failure." I didn't respond because I didn't trust myself not to break down. Then he added something that stuck with me. "You think you lost a family, Lucas, but the truth is she lost you." For the first time in weeks, something inside my chest loosened. Pain didn't disappear, but the shame did. Because until that moment, some part of me still felt like I wasn't enough for Megan to stay faithful. That afternoon didn't fix everything, but it started something. Little by little, I began rebuilding. I started spending time with friends again. I went on hikes. I cooked actual meals instead of living on takeout. I even adopted a dog, a brown mutt named Cooper that a local shelter described as high energy but lovable, slightly chaotic. Felt fitting. Months passed. And then one ordinary Tuesday, I got a text message from Linda. Baby was born healthy. She didn't mention Megan. She didn't ask me to come. She didn't pretend I was part of it. She was just giving me closure. I stared at that text for a long time, then replied, "Thank you. I wish her the best." And that was it. That was the end of that chapter. I never met the baby. I never spoke to Megan again. She moved to another city shortly after giving birth. Her parents told me quietly, without detail, that she wanted a fresh start. I didn't ask for more. I didn't need to. 2 months ago, I sold the old house that once held all the dreams we built on lies. I used the money to buy a small fixer-upper in a better part of town. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine, and every nail I hammer, every floorboard I replace, feels like reclaiming my life one small piece at a time. Last week, while repainting the living room, I realized something. I wasn't thinking about Megan, not her betrayal, not her tears, not her child, not Kyle running away like a coward. I wasn't even thinking about the life I lost. I was thinking about the life I was building. And that was the moment I finally felt free. People say betrayal changes you. They're right. It breaks something in you. But it also builds something else. Boundaries, strength, clarity. It teaches you who you are when everything collapses. And it reminds you that sometimes the people you lose are the ones you were meant to lose. My stepbrother stole my wife. My wife stole my trust. But neither of them stole my future. I walked out of that wreckage stronger, smarter, and finally whole again. This is the ending. I didn't expose them with rage. I exposed them with truth. And the truth ruined their lives far more than revenge ever could. I didn't have to destroy them. They destroyed themselves. And I walked away. That's the part they never saw coming.